All right, let's dive into this whole dopamine thing.
Okay.
I think it's fascinating how it kind of touches everything we do, right? From motivation and focus to like even those bad habits we're all trying to break free from.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we're going off of Ali Abdaal's YouTube video with neuroscientist TJ Power.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it's not like a boring science lecture.
Yeah.
Ali keeps things super engaging, throws in tons of like actually useful tips. So our mission today is to pull out the key takeaways about dopamine and like give you guys some actual strategies to take control, you know, instead of getting lost in all the sciencey stuff.
That's a great goal.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are looking for ways to manage their dopamine better.
Exactly.
It's like everyone's talking about it, but
Yeah.
how many of us actually know how to like use it to our advantage, right?
Exactly. We all know dopamine is linked to pleasure and motivation, but Ollie's video goes deeper.
Right.
It explores like the nuances of how dopamine really affects us.
Yeah.
For example, he talks about this dopamine roller coaster that we're all on in modern life, you know?
Yeah, he makes a good point about how our world is just overflowing with things that trigger these massive dopamine bursts, right? Like constantly checking your phone, scrolling through social media, or like binge watching shows. You feel great in the moment, but it actually drains your dopamine reserves over time.
That's what I found so interesting, that we're actually depleting the very thing that's supposed to drive us forward.
Yeah.
So let's connect this to procrastination.
Okay.
How can understanding dopamine help us overcome that?
Well, it's about realizing our brains love easy rewards. When we put off important tasks for instant gratification, we're basically just reinforcing this negative feedback loop.
Yeah.
Our brain gets used to the quick dopamine hits from, say, scrolling on Instagram,
Right.
and it becomes harder and harder to motivate ourselves to do things that require more effort,
Yeah.
even though they give greater long-term rewards, you know?
It's like we're training our brains to just take the easy way out,
Exactly.
dopamine-wise, right?
That's why Ali brings up this law of dopamine. Take action right when you wake up.
Oh.
Might sound simple,
Yeah.
but it's a super powerful way to set the tone for your dopamine production for the whole day.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the science behind this? Why is taking action first thing in the morning so important for dopamine?
It's about how dopamine's involved in movement.
Oh, well,
Even a small action, like making your bed or just stepping outside, it triggers dopamine release.
I see.
So you're basically priming your brain for a more proactive, dopamine-fueled day.
So instead of grabbing our phones first thing,
Right.
which just depletes dopamine, we should focus on getting ourselves moving.
Exactly.
Huh, I'm starting to rethink my whole scroll in bed routine now.
Yeah, and here's another surprising thing.
Okay.
We actually build up dopamine when we're bored.
Wait, really? Boredom is good for dopamine.
Yeah.
I always thought boredom was something to avoid at all costs.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But our brains evolved to crave novelty and stimulation.
Okay.
So when we're constantly bombarding ourselves with information and entertainment, we're actually preventing our brains from experiencing boredom
Right.
and naturally replenishing those dopamine reserves.
So it's kind of like constantly snacking.
Yeah.
You never really feel truly hungry.
You never give your body a chance to, like, reset.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually reclaim boredom in a world that's designed to keep us constantly stimulated?
Right.
It seems like phone fasting is a good place to start.
Absolutely. And Ollie emphasizes phone-free mornings for at least 15 minutes.
Okay.
He even mentions his own struggles with late-night scrolling and using an app called Opal to block social media.
Wow.
But it's not just about mornings, though, right?
Yeah.
Longer breaks on weekends can be super beneficial for letting our brains reset and recalibrate.
I love the idea of a dopamine detox.
Yeah.
Like giving our brains a chance to recharge. This actually connects to another point that Ellie and TJ bring up, which is how to figure out if something is good or bad for our dopamine.
Right.
Like, how do we know?
They suggest asking two simple but powerful questions.
Okay.
How quickly does something give you pleasure?
Okay.
And will it benefit you or even someone else in the future?
Mm-hmm.
These questions force us to think about both the immediate and long-term impact of our choices.
It's like a quick check to see if we're on the path to healthy or unhealthy dopamine, right?
Exactly.
Oh.
Things that offer instant gratification, like
Yes.
scrolling through TikTok or, indulging in sugary snacks, might give you a quick dopamine spike,
Right.
But those feelings are fleeting, and they might even leave you feeling worse afterward.
Right.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
activities that provide a more gradual and sustained dopamine release,
Okay.
those are the ones that require effort, challenge, and delayed gratification, like learning a new skill, working towards a goal, connecting with loved ones, or even engaging in creative pursuits.
So cooking a healthy meal instead of ordering takeout.
Exactly.
Or spending time writing instead of just passively scrolling.
Yeah, things like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
But even with all this knowledge, those quick dopamine hits can be so tempting.
Oh, yeah.
What strategies can we use to manage our dopamine more effectively?
Well, that's where the real magic happens.
Okay.
Ali and TJ outline a bunch of actionable strategies, starting with the phone fasting we talked about.
Perfect. Let's dive into those now.
Okay, so we were talking about phone fasting as one way to manage those dopamine levels.
Yeah?
What other strategies did Ali and TJ recommend in the video?
I'm curious.
Well, they talked about this thing, finding your flow state, you know?
Ah.
That feeling where you're just like totally absorbed in something.
Yeah.
Time flies by.
Right.
Turns out that's not just like a happy accident.
Right.
It's actually like directly linked to dopamine. There's this psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi,
Okay.
who actually coined the term flow.
Okay.
He found that dopamine plays a huge role in reaching that state.
Wow.
Like a deep focus and just like effortless enjoyment.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I always thought, like, flow state was something for artists or athletes, you know, people who are just like
Yeah.
at the top of their game.
Right.
Is it really something that anyone can
Oh,
experience?
absolutely.
Fine.
It's not about being like the best at something.
Okay.
It's just about finding things that challenge you.
Right.
Just enough.
Yeah.
Without being too overwhelming.
Right.
Think about like a time when you were so engrossed in a project or a hobby or even just a good book
Right.
that you completely lost track of time.
Right.
That's flow.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, right?
Exactly.
Between boredom and anxiety,
Uh-huh.
where you're fully engaged but not stressed out.
Not stressed out.
But how do we get there more often?
Well, it's about being mindful of what you're doing.
Okay.
Paying attention to how those activities make you feel. Like ask yourself, does this challenge me in a way that keeps me engaged,
Right.
but not overwhelmed?
Okay.
And do I actually enjoy what I'm doing?
Good questions.
If you answer yes,
Yeah.
you're probably on the right track to finding your flow.
Awesome.
And then as you do those things more often,
Yeah.
your brain releases more dopamine,
Right.
and that reinforces those feelings of satisfaction
Okay.
and accomplishment.
So it's like this positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
I like that.
The more we experience it, the more our brains want it.
That makes sense.
But let's move on to another strategy that might surprise you.
Oh, wait.
Cold water immersion.
Oh, yeah. Aldi talked about taking cold showers and ice baths
Right.
and how they could boost dopamine,
Yeah.
even compare the effects to cocaine,
I know.
which sounds kind of extreme to me.
It definitely caught my attention, too. Yeah. While it is true that both cold water immersion and cocaine can trigger dopamine, they work in very different ways.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
so how exactly does cold water, like, work its magic on our dopamine?
Okay, so when we expose ourselves to cold,
Mm-hmm.
our body's first reaction is shock,
Right.
which triggers our stress response.
Makes sense.
But here's the interesting part.
Okay.
In response to that stress, our body releases dopamine
Okay.
and endorphins,
Wow.
which have those mood-boosting and pain-relieving effects.
So it's like our body's trying to, like, counteract the stress of the cold
Yeah,
with a dose of feel-good chemical.
exactly.
Interesting.
And then over time, as we adapt to that cold exposure,
Yeah.
the initial shock kind of fades away,
Okay.
and the positive effects like dopamine and that sense of well-being become more pronounced.
So we're basically training our bodies to respond to stress in a healthier way.
Yeah, in a more positive way.
I see how that could be really powerful. But let's be real. Not everyone's jumping at the chance to take an ice bath.
I know.
Are there less intense ways to get that cold exposure?
For sure.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to extremes.
Good.
Even just finishing your shower with like 30 seconds of cold water
Okay.
can give you a noticeable dopamine boost
Right.
and a super invigorating start to your day.
That's much more manageable. I can definitely try that.
Yeah?
Now, the final strategy they discussed was something called My Pursuit,
Yes.
which really stuck with me.
I know, it's a good one.
What's that all about?
My pursuit is about realizing how important it is to have a clear purpose,
Okay.
something that really motivates us
Mm-hmm.
and gives our lives meaning.
Right.
Ali had described it as having a mountain to climb.
I like that analogy.
Yeah,
So our brains are wired to seek purpose,
they are.
and when we have something to strive for,
Yeah.
it fuels our motivation and helps us stay focused.
Exactly.
It makes sense that having a purpose would be linked to dopamine.
Yeah.
When we're working towards something meaningful,
Uh-huh.
those little wins along the way
Right.
probably trigger that dopamine release,
Yeah, that's the idea.
which makes us feel good and encourages us to keep going.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people struggle with finding their purpose, you know?
Yeah.
It can feel like this big abstract concept.
Right.
Luckily, Ollie and TJ offered some advice on how to tap into it.
They did.
So what did they suggest?
They recommended spending time in nature,
Okay.
like totally disconnected from technology,
Right.
to just reflect on what truly matters,
That's a good idea.
you know?
Yeah.
Disconnecting from the noise of everyday life, giving ourselves space to connect with ourselves.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in everything
I know.
that we forget to, like, pause and think
Absolutely.
about what actually brings us joy.
Yeah, what truly fulfills us.
So it's in those quiet moments that we can really figure out what motivates us.
Exactly.
And once we have that clarity, it becomes easier to set goals
For sure.
and take action.
And then that fuels our dopamine system.
And keeps us moving forward.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So we've explored these 4 strategies for managing dopamine:
Yeah.
phone fasting, finding our flow, cold water immersion, and then defining my pursuit.
Right.
And these all seem like really valuable tools for creating a more fulfilling life. They absolutely are.
Yeah.
And the most important thing to remember
Yeah.
is that they work best when we use them together.
Right.
It's about creating a holistic approach
Right.
to dopamine management.
That supports our overall well-being.
Exactly.
So it's like we're building this like toolkit
Yeah,
for hacking our own dopamine system.
exactly.
We're not just relying on those quick hits anymore, right? We're building something more sustainable
Yeah.
to like feel good and stay motivated.
And it's not about denying yourself pleasure or living like a boring life or anything.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices that actually like support your well-being.
Right.
You know, realizing that true fulfillment comes from those deeper, more meaningful sources
Yeah.
of joy and satisfaction.
I love that perspective shift. It's not about deprivation.
Yeah.
It's about empowerment.
Exactly.
It's like we're taking control of our dopamine
Yeah.
instead of letting it control us.
Right. And the cool thing is,
Yeah.
all these strategies are kind of interconnected.
In what way?
Like, phone fasting creates space for boredom,
Okay.
which lets our dopamine levels like naturally replenish.
Right.
That makes it easier to find your flow,
Mm-hmm.
to engage in those meaningful pursuits, and maybe even embrace those cold showers
Yeah.
with a little more enthusiasm, you know.
It's like one healthy habit
Yeah.
reinforces the next.
It creates this like positive feedback loop.
I like it.
Yeah,
That benefits our whole dopamine system.
totally.
And the more we do these things, the more they become like second nature.
Right.
And the more we benefit.
You know, you get that increased focus,
Yeah.
motivation, creativity,
Yeah.
and just that overall sense of well-being.
So it's not about those quick fixes anymore or those temporary boosts.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah,
It's about sustainability, having a healthy and balanced approach to dopamine.
exactly. It's about making choices
Yeah.
that line up with our values
Uh-huh.
and contribute to our long-term happiness and fulfillment.
Which ultimately leads to
Yeah.
a more rewarding and meaningful life.
This deep dive has been amazing.
I know, it's a good one.
It's given me so much to think about.
Yeah,
And I feel inspired to actually put these strategies into practice.
that's great. I'm glad, you know, experiment and see what works for you. It's
Right.
not one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what feels good for you,
Exactly.
what helps you feel your best.
That brings me to a final thought for our listeners.
Okay, I like it.
If you could design your ideal day, right,
Mm-hmm.
for maximizing dopamine, a day filled with activities that energize you,
Right.
inspire you,
Yeah.
and leave you feeling fulfilled,
Yeah,
what would that day look like?
that's such a good question.
Right.
It really makes you think about
Yeah.
how to make your actions
Yeah.
work with your dopamine system.
Exactly. And I think it's a perfect way to take
Yeah.
all these insights
Yeah.
and put them into action
Put them into practice.
by imagining that ideal day.
Right.
We're creating a roadmap, right? For how we want to feel, how we want to live.
And how we want to manage that dopamine.
Exactly. We're taking ownership.
Taking control.
So listeners,
Yeah.
take some time to reflect on that question.
I love it.
What would your ideal dopamine boosting day look like?
It's a good one.
Experiment with the strategies we talked about.
Right.
Notice how they make you feel,
Yeah,
and start designing a life that really lights you up.
absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us for this deep dive
It's been fun.
into the fascinating world of dopamine.
Always something new to learn.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning,
Keep growing.
and keep diving deep.